Guys, just before we get started, if you're loving the podcast, can you please go leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, and please make sure that you subscribe on whatever channel that you listen to us on. It helps us out dramatically.
Follow your heart. Really figure out how you can challenge yourself of what really matters for you, because multiple people have multiple focuses. Both want to be a great partner. I want to be a great father or mother. I want to be a great worker. I want to start up a company. You have all these conflicting priorities, and you're kind of figuring out which voice should I really listen to right now. And there's no right or wrong answer. There's only one truth, and that is you're never going to get that time back again. That's the only truth. So you need to figure out, what can I live with? At the end of the day, if you get diagnosed with cancer 2 weeks from now, was it worth it? Was it? And if you statistically look at how many people get that kind of news on a daily basis, you gotta ask the question of whether or not you can live with yourself with the choices that you're making, and whether or not you're going to be regretting what you're doing. I don't regret anything that I've done. I live with some hard choices of what I've selected. Moving across the world and having 38 hours travel to see your mom or your dad, that's not easy. Saying goodbye to friends and family, and so the sacrifices with everything that we choose in life, and as a founder or emerging founder, those choices, you need to be able to live with them. But choose right.
Steffen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Kang.
It's interesting, I was doing my research and looking at guests that I want to bring on, and a lot of the research is, we talked about it previously, but how can I recreate the experience that I'm trying to create consistency around for our listener. And I come across your profile. I don't know how. I was just researching and creating a short list, and I looked at your CV and marketing executive of the year. You're obviously in the top 50 around e-commerce as well, and they've CMO of the year, in terms of that's a remarkable achievement. But then also e-commerce and obviously such a new industry, but also changing and growing dramatically. I thought, we obviously have a lot of founders that are in e-commerce as well, and I thought, wow, this is just going to be amazing. So I'd love to start with your story and kind of how you've gotten to where you have in your career and what that's included.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is probably to say that I didn't want to be a marketer. And I don't consider myself a marketer either, which is probably a bit weird considering what you just said. And I probably managed over the last 8-9 years to build a little bit of a brand here for myself here in Australia since I arrived, and probably inadvertently pigeonholed myself as the marketing guy, really, even though I don't consider myself a marketer or a marketing guy. I tend to be good at it, and that's probably how I've grown within that space, and my recognition in that space has been growing as well. My journey originally, as you can hear from my butchered accent, is clearly not Australian. Originally from Denmark, and I left Denmark probably, I think it's 10 years ago or something like that. Moved to Italy, spent a while in Italy, in Milan, then moved to Indonesia, spent some time in Indonesia, and then met an Australian girl there. Fell in love, and the hard ones were the hard ones, so we decided to move over here. And look, my journey really was, I didn't really know what I wanted to do in my early days, and was really a lost guy in my very early years. Jumped between different kind of educations, had no idea what I wanted to do, just believed I needed to follow my passion. But at that age, the passion changed all the time, so I really didn't know which direction I wanted to go in. So I just tried a lot of different things and kept challenging myself on different industries and with different things. To cut a very, very long story short, I ended up in the army at a point where that didn't really work for me either, and taking a sergeant's degree, which in Denmark technically is it's a degree in people leadership and people management, logistics for me as well. Took that, find out that the army really wasn't for me, and got a little bit bored. And as standard is in Denmark, as a sergeant in there, one of your responsibilities, and not in wartime, is very simple things like being at the barracks and making sure that your recruits are opening up the gate for people to come in, check IDs, silly stuff like that. Outside of course, practicing for war scenarios and etc. And training up recruits into being soldiers. But outside of that, it's typical administration like that. And I was withering away and dying in that capacity. And for fun, I tried to sell my then partner's used jewelry on a marketplace. And for some reason, it worked. I sold it. And in that moment where I sold the first thing online, I got immediately hooked. Absolutely hooked immediately. And kind of asked for more of her used stuff that I could sell online just to get time to pass by. And really found that deep passion and affinity in selling stuff online. And that moment was the start of probably me sitting here today and having met a wonderful woman in my life and having the child that we have together today. And my position in life as well, really. It was that moment of selling something online for the first time that just clicked with me and hooked. She worked as a as a sales assistant in a jewelry store, so she had access to cheap jewelry because you got discount for it. So it really was me having easy access to some pretty cheap inventory, and then and selling that online. And it didn't take long, of course, before I started growing that and wanting more inventory and figure out, well, how do I really wholesale this? How do I really get the right things? And having no real experience in retail whatsoever, it was really just a learning on the job and just thinking, well, how can I make this happen? Having no idea what I was doing. It grew from there, from jewelry to more jewelry, into appreciating and understanding, okay, so everybody gets stuff from China. How do I get in dialogue with China? And this was, again, 10, 15 years ago. You know, Alibaba was really, really young off the ground back then. But with AliExpress and Alibaba coming out of the gates at that period, there was an entry point that didn't require you to fly to China to go on sourcing trips at that point. So bit of a hustle, bit of a grit, just figuring it out on the fly. And, you know, there was a lot of affiliate PDF files circulating in the time, you know, with drop shipping vendors. These were the really early days of that kind of stuff. So kind of started out with that and then grew it from there. Added more products, got access. Oh, okay, so they got cheap tech products as well. Let's get that home, you know, and see if that can sell. And it really became what evolved into a technology company selling technology products, you know, tech products, cheap, tacky stuff with wonderful margin on it, absolute fabulous margin, right? Bit the same story as Kogan, really crap from China, but with fantastic margin on it. And then getting started with that. And then as time went by, you know, we grew to a size where we need to get out and get proper warehousing, proper logistics for it. And at the same time, we wanted to expand and get other brands in. So we've got proper local distributors on board. And back then, when you were trying to cut a deal with a local distributor, it was very much, well, where you should store. Well, we sell online. We're not going to sell to you then. You're not going to get any products. So it was really, really difficult getting cut through and getting products from companies, particular companies like Samsung, Sony, and Apple that we were trying to win deals with back then. But I came a point where they were ready for that, and we started getting that on board, and we moved away from selling on marketplace. Well, we only got Apple and all the brands after we moved away from the marketplaces, so timeline needs to be right here. But yeah, we then went out, built our own website, and got going with that, and became a good distributor, and both wholesaler and business to consumer, business to business retailer of high-end electronics, so TVs, laptops, computer peripherals, and all that jazz. So very close to what you see from the likes of Kogan here today. Yeah. Taking a bit of a more focus on the higher upscale brands. Even though our pedigree and our background really was in the cheap stuff. Then came the global financial crisis in 2009 at that point, and that was the absolute death of absolutely everybody selling those kind of products in basically in Europe and Scandinavia in general. So we didn't survive that. Spent some time before I started up an agency instead. So I created a digital agency that was focused on conversion rate optimization, again with the focus on design, development, user experiences, so CX, UX, and CRO. Again, back before CRO was an actual term and terminology. So really just focusing on user experiences and supporting other businesses and growing their e-commerce ventures in a time where e-commerce was still incredibly young and incredibly new. So we grew that on an international scale to around 300 international clients of different sizes, predominantly around the small, medium enterprise segment, around probably around $5 to $15 million in turnover. Those kind of companies were kind of the sweet spot where we had a good opportunity to help them in the right stages, where we can really see how we can make you from a startup into a scale-up, proper scale-up, and take them on that journey there. So we were focused on that for a long time, and that was both in design and development, predominantly design and development, and some marketing capacity within that. So my background quickly went from retail really into tech, and working more on really building proper digital solutions for our clients that needed to get problem resolved on that. And we probably had around 90% of our clients within the e-commerce space, but also worked with the Danish government. We had the Danish Technical University as one of our clients. We did all their email, all the CRM for them. The Danish government had called me in for, I think it was COP 13, to support their initiatives where we had all the Baltic countries that we needed to work with on development, and I was brought in to support the organization and the government in delivering that for COP 12, COP 13, I think it was. So the agency really was focused on that and build a good brand in terms of conversion rate optimization, website building, and design in that space. So I spent some years doing that, and then moved to Italy to start up a branch of the company in Italy. I guess to not harp too long on the journey here, later started a production company in Indonesia, a jewelry fashion company in Indonesia. Ran that for a while, and that's where I met my wonderful partner, who was also an entrepreneur in Indonesia. And we spent some time together, and there came a point where she became pregnant, and I had a new decision to make. And the decision was that after having spent that 10-15 years 18 hours a day, and at that point I was flying in Asia all the time on sourcing trips, and as you appreciate, the startup hustle is a hustle, it's a grind, and while some people can navigate having families and kids at the same time, I largely grew up without a father figure in my life for many parts of my year, and I had a very personal decision where that's not going to be my child. So I decided to exit everything that I was doing and saying, no, I'm just going to focus on my family and being a father first and foremost, and then whatever that brings.
There's a lot of power in that, and I think it takes a lot of courage to not only make that decision, but also talk about that decision, because there is a massive stigma around that kind of conversation of, well, it's not quitting, or it's not that at all. It's actually, well, what do I want in life? What do I want to give others in life? And, I'm going to make that decision and actually remove my ego from that conversation and actually not, because there is nothing wrong with that. And I think that that's the most important conversation that if, any founder, and I still have these conversations in my head every single day, and it's like, at some point you've got to ask yourself what you actually want in life, not what does everyone expect me to have, or what does everyone expect from me.
But 15 years ago, being a founder wasn't rock star status. It was a very reclusive.
It wasn't the internet.
It was not what it is today. And today, very much fueled by the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, the superheroes and the superstars that's making it big, the billion-dollar companies, Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and all that. You got to be a 7 or 10 time over founder before you're really a proper founder. The idea that's being fueled, I disagree with. I 100% agree with following your heart, following your passion, and focusing on your happiness, and let things come as they come. I guess that's also easy to sit and say from a point of privilege. So there needs to be recognition that some people have it harder and some people have it a little bit easier. But for me, I'm happy to forgo money and credit and ego for the sake of security and happiness, and spending my time how I want to spend it. And that's been my focus for the past 8 or 9 years while I've been here in Australia. It's been exactly that. Enjoying life, sinking my teeth into something that really is meaningful for me, that makes sense for me, grows me professionally and personally. But I'm not going to go out and start another company just yet. Not just yet. No, but my son is turning 7 now, so who knows what's in the future. But that's been what I've been saying at home as well, to my partner, very honest, Even though once in a while she hears me kind of go, I got the itch. Got the itch again. Then we have that open and honest conversation at home where I know what it means, because I'm incredibly obsessive. I'm incredibly addicted to these kind of things, which has always been my force of learning as well. Jumping out into industries that you have no business in doing anything in that one. You had agencies that went, what the hell is this guy and his team doing in this one? They have no business doing what they're doing. Yeah, we're winning all the clients anyway. And there's a reason for that. Not playing to conformity, not playing to constructs and playing to that, but actually just getting good at stuff and really looking at how can we improve what's out there in the market. And with that said, I think passion, talent, Your talent for getting stuff done and talent for executing things and seeking out answers to problem. I think that's more important than anything else. So that also requires time and commitment. And then that's the trade-off that you often give as a founder if you're in new waters and new territories where it's untread waters. And then it's not always about whether you're the best in the industry to doing what you're doing, but if you're the hardest worker out there right now, you can outwork everybody. And sometimes that's enough. Not necessarily to be the number one in the world, but enough to carve yourself a decent share of the market or carve yourself a decent position right now to live comfortably for it. Creating creating a $5 to $10 million a year company is not difficult. It's not. It can be formulaic. If you're good at work, you work hard. You're good at with your people. You're good with customers and do right by everybody. Then doing business is not that difficult. It's not rocket science.
It's very true. I want to just, before we move forward, because I think we're at the point now where we can we actually haven't spoken about it yet, and Booktopia and that kind of journey that you're on. But I think there's a really important point that I don't think we've had this conversation on the podcast yet. That what's your advice to founders if they feel that friction that maybe you felt, when you were like, well, I've got this force over here, which is family and a desire as well, like fatherhood and really wanting to put my all into that and so on, versus this obviously other passion that you have, which is business and building business and so on. And if someone's feeling that friction, what advice do you have for them?
Oh, it's going to be very individual, I think, in terms of what really matters for different people. The overarching advice would be to I think so cliche, but really listen to your heart and figure out what really is important for you. For many people, it's the motivation of money. It's the motivation of, getting the big house, the big car, and all of those things. And if that is the motivation, I think my best advice is that there is a point where happiness from money is so minuscule. It's about security. Most people get the most value out of money if they came up from a broken home, insecurity, not knowing where they could sleep, not knowing if they could eat. I have slept on benches. I have counted how many slices of cheese that I had and what the value of a slice of cheese. I've been there. I know that. And I'm not going to try to say that I've been in poverty in that sense. I've had my own hardships in my younger years, but compared to so many other people, not poverty whatsoever. Very privileged life compared to many other people around the world. But yeah, no, I've been looking at slices of cheese and not knowing how I could eat for a few days and stuff like that as well, many times over. And knowing from that experience, going from what I perceived as being poverty back then, I thought that about myself. But going from there, in retrospect, I can see that the only place where I really got true happiness was the second I didn't need to think about getting a roof over my head, the second I didn't need to think about a bed, the second that I didn't think about whether or not I could eat, and the second that I didn't have to feel like I constantly had to compromise on the quality of everything that I did for myself because I couldn't afford anything for myself. The second that I didn't have to do think like that anymore, that was where I got the most value financially wise. After that, no amount of money have made any happiness for me. None. Absolutely none. And it doesn't matter how much money extra I'll be getting from this point out. I'm not going to get more happiness out of the money. I got the freedom that I needed, and that's what's most important, and I wouldn't trade that. So that's probably the most important advice for everybody who looks at the money and get fueled by that. I meet very few people who say the opposite of what I'm saying right now. Most of the people that I've met that have gained success says something similar. So that's probably the big one. Follow your heart. Really figure out how you can challenge yourself of what really matters for you, because multiple people have multiple focuses. Both want to be a great partner. I want to be a great father or mother. I want to be a great worker. I want to start up a company. You have all these conflicting priorities, and you're kind of figuring out which voice should I really listen to right now. And there's no right or wrong answer. There's only one truth, and that is you're never going to get that time back again. That's the only truth. So you need to figure out, what can I live with? At the end of the day, if you get diagnosed with cancer 2 weeks from now, was it worth it? Was it? And if you statistically look at how many people get that kind of news on a daily basis, you gotta ask the question of whether or not you can live with yourself with the choices that you're making, and whether or not you're going to be regretting what you're doing. I don't regret anything that I've done. I live with some hard choices of what I've selected. Moving across the world and having 35, 38 hours travel to see your mom or your dad, that's not easy. saying goodbye to friends and family, you know. And so the sacrifices with everything that we choose in life, and as a founder or emerging founder, those choices, you need to be able to live with them. But choose right. And choose from that perspective, then I think you're going to be doing the right thing. But that's also why I chose what I chose now. First 10, 15 years of my life, different focus, different position. I can make those kind of choices. But I also learned to swallow my pride and swallow my ego in the early years of doing business. And as such, I don't care what people think about me. I don't need to be perceived as a founder. I don't care about the label. You know, I care about being happy and having fun and doing great things and having great people around me. That's the only thing that matters. And I do that right now. And I don't need to have a founder's hat on to achieve that.
And I think that's so powerful. And as I said, I don't think I've had that conversation on here before. And when I heard you kind of speaking, I could feel that. And I know that that's a battle that a lot of people will have or have had in the past. And so
it's a lonely gig.
Yeah.
Can be.
100%. All right, so that kind of gets us to where we are now, right? Which is, I'll obviously let you kind of continue the story and kind of explain to everyone a little bit about what you do now and you know where you're at.
Sure. So when I came to Australia here some years back, with the idea that you could just go from hustling for 15 years to do absolutely nothing and just enjoy life, and just be a parent or a partner. That doesn't work very well. I quickly learned, and as I was crawling and bouncing off the walls and driving my partner absolutely mental, to put a CV together, I found an opportunity with a company that's called the Co-op, and they were looking for the next stages in their journey from a digital perspective and needed someone to come in and lead the digital growth of the company from an e-commerce perspective. Co-op was a 75-year-old non-for-profit organization that was focused on making textbooks cheaper for university students. That was the idea, and they had at that point, at the point where I came into the business, 75 physical stores on campus ground, on university campus grounds, and an online component of it. And my mission was to grow the online component and come up with great ideas on digitalization of learning as well. So that was it, and I ended up as the general manager of digital and marketing at that business that underwent large transformation as well as the market around. And I had no business being in textbooks either, by the way, but it was retail, and I could figure out retail, and I could do that, right? So that market turned out to be in decline. I wasn't aware of that when I came into the business, but it turned out on a global level, the entire industry around physical textbooks was in a decline because they were changing the way that they were consuming knowledge at universities and learning. So a bit of a tough gig, like taking on Blockbuster at the wrong time, you know. So they underwent a lot of transformations within the business, and I spent around 3.5 years there. We won a lot of UX awards and a lot of digital awards for what we did over there, but it really was leading all the digital strategy, all the marketing for all the stores as well at the end of it. We also acquired forgot what they're called right now. Australian Geographic. We acquired the rights for Australian Geographic. We bought that off the Smith family and got that into the business as well. And with Australian Geographic, we now had a foray into STEM products, tech products, and toys for kids across multiple big malls and centers across the country, and a few flagship stores within that. So now all of a sudden it was two brands underneath the brand umbrella. Physical store footprint of around 120 stores. I managed two websites, probably 2 or 3 marketplaces, and we built all that digital technology, the back end, the front end, and all of it into what now, again in hindsight, turns out to be incredibly ahead of time. Right now you hear about headless is all of a sudden the terminology. We built that back then as a standard thing when when JavaScript was more accessible back then. So we built some great cutting edge technology already back then. So that was a great fun, great journey for the business as well. And then fast forward 3.5 years, I think it was, I ended up with Booktopia as the chief marketing officer at Booktopia. And Booktopia, for those who don't know the business, is pure play online retail. It was founded 18 years ago by a bunch of marketers, with Booktopia being a side hustle. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Yeah. That was what I fell in love with, really. There was that idea that these guys, these founders, felt like kinsmen, really. You know, so yeah, I can dig that. You know, we can definitely work together. I want to do that, and be part of that journey. Again, I didn't need to be the founder of the company. I just need to work with smart and capable people that had vision and wanted to do great stuff. And Booktopia at that point had been around for 18 years. I mean, doing the same thing as I did back in the early days. You know, start from a bootstrap, all your rack foundation, reinvesting all your profits into products, taking no outside investments whatsoever, just growing organically from that with the pride that is that. Also the slow growth that exists within that, of course. But ended up where we are today, which is a company with roughly 300 employees. We're turning over $250 million. We're selling a book online every 3.8 seconds, I think it is.
I read that. That's the craziest stat of all time.
We got 6 million products on the website across 2,400 categories. We got 27,000 square meters of inventory with robotics, automatic pick and pack, you know, the whole shebang in terms of inventory. So a great business. Over those years, Booktopia also acquired other companies as well, and coming full circle, after I've been with Booktopia for around 2 years, we actually acquired the co-op, my previous
really?
business. We acquired the digital component, all the stuff that we've been doing back over there in the day, and then from there it became the largest resource provider for university students here in Australia. We couldn't take on the physical stores. That was really the crux of the challenges that the business had, and the reason why I went into administration in the first place, predominantly around, you know, store footprint and overheads around that. So we only took on the digital component on it to remain our status as a pure play online retail. Mm-hmm. We were at that point already operating both booktopia.com.au and also another mergers and acquisition. We bought another company called Angus and Robertson.
Yep.
Same methodology. They also had physical stores but came into challenges. And again, we could see the opportunity to go into snap up the digital component, because most retailers make this mistake, and I see it across every single boardroom out there continually. They're not learning from this. There are too many who are too proud to let go of the loss-making part of the business. They are so used to so many boardrooms that are out there right now that are so stuck in their archaic ways of being a physical footprint retailer that they cannot conceive the thought of spinning off the digital component, where while this total group might right now be a $300 million business and your online component might only be $30 million, they cannot conceive of the idea of spinning the $30 million organization out that is still profitable, can operate self-sustainably and profitably for the organization in a new and lowered revenue base. But no, instead they would rather go into administration, and they would rather take the losses and cause everybody grief. I'm mind-boggled by it, really, and I see it repeatedly across any kind of organization out there. It's one of the areas where I wish that the market would mature a little bit more, swallow the pride, let go of it, save the jobs, save the businesses, and accept that every company goes through different kind of life stages. And guess what Facebook is looking like right now? They're not growing anymore. What, you thought it was going to be infinite growth? Who gave you that idea? So and I think back to these kind of companies and acquisitions around them, it's a great opportunity for mergers and acquisitions for companies like us. They go out and see it and can spot it and have massive value out of it. So Booktopia has been operating Angus and Robertson as a self-sustainable business model since 2015, I think it was, or 2016, and it operates great, operates well, and it has been since then. So yeah, we're happy we could snap that one up. So we acquired a few other companies, and over the time we've then also expanded. Being a retailer is great, but as most retailers can appreciate, you know, if you want to own the margin and improve your margin, you need to own the supply chain to a certain extent. Yeah. So we've cut our teeth, built our pedigree on being the best at figuring out how do we source the best books in the world, and how do we get it most efficiently out to customers. But it's the best experience to get them out to customers. And within that, we've expanded on that, and then also saying, well, how can we be the best for other retailers, or other booksellers? We got all the access. We got all. How
can you go vertical?
Yeah. So within that, we started up a division that's called Booktopia Publisher Services, which is a division that is a wholesale business. Technically, it's a business to business where we service right now 1,500 bookstores or booksellers across the country, where they buy wholesale their books that they're selling in their physical stores. They're buying them from Booktopia through our wholesale division, BPS. To add to that as well, that's the next level of the supply chain, right? And then what's the next part? Well, it's owning the actual content. How do you become the content owner? Well, in the book world, it's the publishers. It is the people who are producing the actual content. And it's the same methodology that you will see with Amazon Prime doing their own TV shows, doing their own movies, being the producers of that. Same idea. How do you go from being from a retail distribution point into actually owning the supply chain? And then from the supply chain, how do you own the actual content, the production of that? There you go. Now you take the full clip of the ticket. There's nothing else. Full margin leverage. And of course, you also have the competitive leverage and competitive advantages for it. So not only did we have Booktopia Publisher Services, but we also started up Booktopia Publishing to then becoming a publisher. And today we are both publishing, we are distribution, wholesaling, and we are a retailer across those multiple retail touchpoints.
So I just want to explain what that means, because that's a very technical analysis, right, for somebody who may, is in the early days. But when you say are only in distribution, you're only in one kind of level of the supply chain, you obviously still have the different parts of the supply chain, and you are involved in that supply chain. So the reason you want to own the whole supply chain is then your margins will dramatically increase, correct?
Absolutely. A good example is any direct-to-consumer company out there. They typically start, again, back to the founders' narrative here. Most direct-to-consumer companies are people like the three of us in the room right now that just have a great idea. You know what? I want to be the next Gymshark. I'm going to start up a little gym brand. So I'll make my own T-shirts, my own prints, and I'm gonna do that down in my basement, which is what he did. The founder of Gymshark, he was sitting there on the sewing machine. Yes, grown-up guy going to the gym and sitting on the sewing machine at night. I love that guy, by the way. And you do that, you start out like that, and then there comes a point where you go, I need partners to do that so I can scale up. I can't sit and do this. I can't sell 100,000 of those in a month if I need to do this myself. So you start getting out and getting partners. They're taking a margin, all of that. There comes a point where you got the money, the capital, or the opportunity to actually buy the manufacturing capacity, the actual manufacturing plant, or the people who are producing the products that you have. And that is where most companies will find the most profitability. It's by owning the entire supply chain from manufacturing to the retail component. And it's also why you see more and more direct-to-consumer brands move into that, or more brands go into the direct-consumer space, like Nike did, all of a sudden cutting down on what they were doing there and going in and owning the customer as well. So ownership of supply chain is important to protect margins and have a unique value proposition and distinction.
Yeah. And so, you've got companies like Amazon who have gone out and done that,
They go the opposite way now. They're actually reducing that, actually.
Yeah. But, Tesla, Apple, all these companies, like the microchips and so on. So, like, I think that's really interesting, because I've never really heard of it in retail before, in terms of, obviously, the way Booktopia's done it as well.
Kogan is exactly the same.
Kogan, yeah.
Kogan is exactly the same. Most of the products that they sell are still Kogan products, right?
Oh, at what
Protecting
point...
the margin.
So what are we talking, in terms of timing for a business? Because we're talking, a lot of our listeners are going to be in startups, right? So, but at what point do you need to start thinking about these things?
I think you need to be at the right point in your customer journey, and this is a very ambiguous way of saying it. It depends on what you have the capability or the capacity to do. There's an old saying that some people would rather own 10% of a $1 billion company than 100% of a $100,000 company. And that can make a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. I've also seen firsthand all the reasons why that can be a pretty bad idea, and what that can mean. And I think people with access to capital, or the capability to get the capital, who are willing to take that journey and are willing to take that risk of diluted ownership, or are happy with that, and maybe they're just chasing the money. Maybe they're just saying, I'm going to allocate 4 years of my life to build this product up, this company up. I'm going to spin it off, or I'm going to sell it off. I'm going to get private equity into it, and then they're going to go VC, and then they're going to try an IPO, and hands are kind of brushed off in the early days, but I'll still take my clip of the ticket for the 4+ years, depending on what kind of journey you really want. And I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think it depends on where do you think you're going to be the most happy, I would still say. But for most people, it's going to be the start with the customer. Start with having a relevant product that's relevant for an audience, and make sure that that's going to be persisting, that you're going to keep having that demand for those products. Keep adding more to it. Keep growing your customer base. And when you're feeling confident that your investment is going to be paying a return on investment, then I think it's perhaps time to do all those things. But the
There's no right answer. It's kind of individual, isn't it?
The most company deaths comes from people overextending themselves and going out and making these kind of investments too early on. And then you got two options. Either they got in too deep, now they get so much overheads, there's no way to get out. And now you need to just turn the business off. Not every company gets sold. Not every company in struggles are going to go through proper administration. Some people just turn it off. Some people just walked away with huge debts. What we hear about, what people are talking about, all the people are managed to. Yeah, it's the sexy stuff. It's the stuff that people are okay with getting out there, either because the sad story is a great narrative as much as the positive story. But nobody wants to talk about. I turned it off. Honestly, the engine in my car was done. It would cost me more to put it to the what do you call it, the chop shop than it would just leaving it on the curb. Not many people really talk about that. So the answer to the question really is incredibly contextual, and it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. But I guess what you can say here is, if you focus on how you scale your company, if you focus on right-sizing your cost to the journey that you really strongly believe you're going to be seeing ahead of yourself, then you're not going to be too far off. But the second you have companies that go out and scale too bloody fast, that's when you're getting problems. I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus. I have great respect for it, but Fast was a great example of a company that went hard out the gate right now with one-click solutions online, massive funding out there, people got hired from left and right, and some of the best talent in the world were actually joining that company, and they turned the engine off after, 12 months or something like that.
It's kind of like WeWork, right? WeWork, it's very similar, so they didn't turn it off, and it's kind of, but they were going down that similar path where the funding was coming in when there wasn't really much happening under the hood, and it was probably too soon, and they overextended themselves and got themselves into a place that was, they're still recovering now, so
they are, but you're a little bit back to what I said before, which is somebody else is holding the stick, right? Somebody else's problem at the end of the day. And when you're getting a lot of capital in, you're beholden to different investors and different people, and the journey of a founder or of a CEO is profusely different from being a startup or a scale-up or a public listed company, and I can most certainly attest to that, as we went through that journey. Booktopia was a privately owned company and went public during my tenure. We actually went public. Succeeded in that. We raised $43 million worth of capital. We went out and did the crowdfunding route in the beginning and failed miserably at that. So I can tell you great stories on how you don't raise $10 million in capital from crowdfunding and Birchall or Equidize and all of them. I can tell you what doesn't work. But we did get access to some great wholesale investors and some great investors in general, and that investment community. So it did bring something with it. And at the end of the day, it was also part of the learnings that brought us to where we were, where we can successfully list during COVID. But being a public listed company or getting capital in is different. It's different beholden. It can also be a lifesaver. It can make people very, very rich. It can make people very, very, very free. But the question really is if you're happy.
Yeah, definitely comes back to what you said before. Guys, if you're loving this episode, make sure to take a screenshot, give us a tag, or even take a photo if you're watching it. Help spread the love. It helps us out dramatically. Guys, I want to say a massive thank you to our major sponsors, BizCover. I was driving home the other night and I thought to myself, wow, we have so much stuff in the studio that is extremely valuable, and if anything ever happened to it, I would never be able to forgive myself. So I needed contents insurance. By the time I got home, within 20 minutes, I was insured. There was no paperwork, and it was literally one of the easiest processes I've ever gone through. And that's the beauty of BizCover. They'll give you the best price. There's no paperwork involved, and it's truly so easy. So whether it's public liability, professional indemnity, or even like me, contents insurance, BizCover's you go to when it comes to getting your company insured and making sure that nothing ever comes to get you in the future. So if you want to get your company insured and check them out, the link to their website is in the show notes. I've been a customer now for 7 years, and it's for good reason. Check them out. Okay, so everyone's got a bit of an idea of your career and obviously your expertise. So this question, I've been really excited to have this conversation with you, is what's the state of play in e-commerce currently? And, what do people really need to know? So everywhere from, a company that might be a startup, someone's got an idea and they're going to jump into it. There might be a year in, they could be 5 years in. What's the state of play currently, and what do people need to know?
I think there's two big topics right now, and I have the privilege at speaking at quite a few events in this topic and in this particular area around e-commerce, and the questions that I typically get and the answers that I'm typically seeing out there are very much aligned with what I'm going to say right now. You hear the same overarching narrative on the different events. Cash is king right now. you need to right-size your costs as a business right now. You need to make sure you got all your costs under control. There's been major supply chain disruptions for a long time. They're not looking like they're going to disappear anytime soon. At the same time, getting access to capital is becoming increasingly more hard. As you see the stock market taking massive hits, you have an entire retail or e-commerce index on the ASX here right now, but we're butchered some months back. Small recuperation happening right now, but it really stems from that belief. There's a belief in the investor community that the growth of e-commerce and the penetration of online retail had come to a new level, was going to stay there. And everybody in retail were running around and saying, this is not going to stay, it's not going to stick. What do you think is going to happen when physical stores are opening up again and they can buy products in physical stores, which around 80 to 90% of human beings prefer? Now, you only have around 10%, depending on who you're asking, 10 to 12% of the retail wallet happens online. So when all the physical stores closed down, guess where it went? It went online. That's not a growth that's gonna continue.
And that's why. So yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense as to why a lot of say, because like I've got some friends that are in e-commerce fashion, some people we've had on the show, Elite 11 and South Street. They're small companies, but they during COVID and lockdowns that's where they've seen obviously a lot of growth, and they've also just gone into retail shop and having stores in Pac Fair and Melbourne and so on. So that makes a lot of sense. The dynamic of it, if that makes sense, and why it actually occurred. Mm-hmm. So just to continue on that, so so you were talking about the dynamic of that, obviously savings and margins, yes, and so on, because obviously the economy, and I think this is something for founders, and small business owners, like I notice, and I committed this as well. I was one of the true offenders here. But when you're a small business, and especially if you haven't been in business long or you don't have much experience, it can be all product and internal, and you don't pay too much attention to what's happening externally in the business, especially if you don't know basic economics and how the economy works and so on. So you were kind of talking about margins and making, obviously being profitable and stacking cash in the background.
Yeah, look, and governing your cash flow is critically important. And really focusing on having access to self-sustainable capital, whether or not it's your own from your margins, your operating margins, or whether or not it's from capital coming in from investors. But it's going to be harder to get that right now for most companies. So the critical thing to do right now is to make sure that you're right-sizing your company to the road ahead, which is what you're seeing in the market that many companies are doing. Most of us bet on one thing, which might either be plateauing, have no growth year on year. Some people were planning for significant growth year on year because they believed that they were going to continue their trajectory. And for those companies, they bet wrong. And you will see mass layoffs in the market across many, many big companies that have been betting big on that. It's Spotify just came out here, was it yesterday or the other day? And I hate to see so many great colleagues in the industry losing their jobs right now. But that's a good example of a company that put a punt on it, that put a bet, as any company does. We can't predict the future. If we could, what are we doing in the business? Is we should just buy stocks, cash out after the day. So I guess long-winded answer to shorten it down right now: control your equity, control your cost, really focus on sustainable growth for the business, focusing on your operating margins. Consider whether or not it's worthwhile slowing down the growth. If you got investors on board, fight tooth and nail right now to convince those investors that this is not the time for growth. This is the time for consolidation. That consolidation will be the foundation of growth, where we just get a little bit further ahead. Boy, you should hold tight right now. Hold.
And same for the small business owners, I would assume. If if there's not investors coming in, and again, this kind of factors into what I was saying before. I was like, if you're not paying attention to what's happening outside of your business and you're understanding that the economy is slowing down, and that means your demand might slow down. And if you're betting on or trying, you're kind of having your operations internally and kind of your functions betting on similar to growth to maybe what you've experienced over the last 2 years, it could be quite painful.
To add to that, I would also say all of that is on the predicate that you have not optimized everything you have in your business, which let's be real, most companies have not. They've been focusing on growth at all costs, or hyper growth, or scaling up, and they've been so busy doing all of that and focusing on that. But there's a leaky bucket. So the question really is, how leaky is your bucket? You know, how much you're hemorrhaging profitability or losing cash right now. And that's again why a lot of companies are ending up turning off. If you're in a position right now where you feel we did a great job during COVID, we knew this was coming, and we've been consolidating for a while now, and put ourselves in a great foundation, a great position of growth. Well, then there's an opportunity in downturn. There's an opportunity in saying, well, everybody else is turning off, everybody else is slowing down and consolidating. And that's where many entrepreneurs and growth people would say that's the opportunity in the market right now. Everybody's pulling back. Go 100 miles an hour. And if you have the access to get to capital or the opportunity to do that, then that would be the perfect strategy at the moment. You know, with people slowing down, if you can take over, then do that. But it shouldn't be growth on all costs.
And so for someone who's listening, you know, maybe a small business owner who's listening, or, you know, a founder of some sort, does that depend on the efficiency that you've had previously? So how profitable, you know, like, you burn multiple, you know, like how much money are you burning compared to the growth that you're actually generating in revenue, you know? So if you were inefficient, it's probably not the time to go. Whereas if you were really efficient and you know, you're spending $1 and you're making 10,
yes,
you know, that's the time where, you know, now's a really big opportunity for you.
Yeah, in practical terms, I'm trying not to buzzword too much right now, but in practical terms, that's really it. Focus on where you can see that you might have invested too heavy, or you're not getting the efficiencies out of things. Like a good example is on the second component to your question, is, you know, right sizing both staff, talent, skills, technology, and tools. Right sizing that to where you are right now, and what you have projected is your near-term future, maybe a 2-3 year horizon right now. You know, it can be incredibly expensive going out and getting all the right tools to run really, really good e-commerce. You know, whether or not that's personalization, CRM, CDPs. There's a lot of buzzwords out there right now, all catering for the same thing of how do we get the right message in front of the right customer at the right time, which is the holy grail of jargon really in the marketing industry. But there's some truth in it, but it also means that a lot of people have been allured into buying these flashy, shiny tools that are doing more than what they need to do, and you're ending up having a tool set where you either don't have the capacity, the skills, or the people to operate it, and now you're sitting there with the excess cost that you can't really navigate out of. So trying to right size your expenses and your tool set, your skill set to where you are right now and in the future becomes more and more critical.
So right sizing being making sure that you're not overdoing it or getting it right for the current conditions of the company, or, you know, everything happening around it.
Absolutely. Here's another one. If you're a scrappy little startup and somehow manage to convince I don't know, the chief operating officer of Facebook, was it Sheryl Sandberg? I hear she's looking for a new gig or whatever. If you manage somehow to get her in because investors could be alert and all of that, yeah, that's fine. And she's ticking in at what, $5 million a year. You know, I'm making an excessive and dramatic example out of this one, but getting the best people into your business is not always the right choice. If it's not always the best people for your business, it's not always the best people out in the industry. Sometimes it might be somebody who is significantly cheaper for you, that has the hunger, that has the capacity to grow into something, rather than perhaps the best person out in the market. And as a company, and as a company owner, it's your darn responsibility to make sure that you're not paying more for talent than you actually should do right now. So when I'm saying right sizing, I mean that across everything from talent, skills, the remuneration for that talent, skills, and also the tools and the technologies that they're using. And that could be a bit of a slippery slope to try and make that possible, figuring that out, and requires both cultural and employee understanding, talent hunt and talent nurturing, understanding that quite well, and technology understanding at the same time, and marketing and customer understandings, which most founders end up having because they have to be the jack of all trade and have some skills in all those areas simultaneously. That's why they're a weapon. That's why they're powerful.
And so, yeah, to put that, so like, that's really interesting. So what you're saying in terms of, even talking technology, if you're and let's just talk a smaller company now, because I think that'll resonate with a lot of the listeners, is like, maybe it's a CRM, or, you've put an investment into a big CRM or something of that nature, or some type of technology that you've brought in that is, costing you a fair whack in regards to how much revenue you're bringing in and so on. And it might not be the best time to actually go after that, and it might be good to create more profitability for the next 6 to 12 months, maybe 18 months, and really try to push through where we're at currently in the economy, and then, you know, really push for growth then, rather than pushing for growth now. And, you know, that it's like a time horizon thing, isn't it?
It is. It is also the capability to spot what revenue is or turnover is for you. Sometimes you need to forego good revenue to only get great revenue. Sometimes you need to forego decent customers to only nurture for the best customers. Sometimes it means to cut away, you know. And in the agency world, it's the same thing. If you typically you will find that, you know, 20% of your clients are taking 80% of your time. You got those one or two or three clients that just takes all of your time. It's so difficult, you know. And I don't mean that in a facetious way in any way, but, you know, some clients are just great clients and some clients are just not. And I think everybody who's having experience in the agency world would be able to nod to that. And as an agency owner, it's darn difficult to go out and cut a client away and say, we can't work with you anymore. We're not going to do it. And I've been in that position as well, where we just had to make that call. And that's back into not all revenue is good revenue. You need to look at profitability. You need to look at efficiency. You need to look at culture in the company as well. And you need to make sure that everything is right sized to where you need to be and operate.
That's the truth, if I've ever heard it. Okay, so then to follow on the e-commerce of like what people should be looking out for, what you know, from a first principle standpoint, what are the functions that create a successful e-commerce business, or what are the principles, you know, like, so let's say, I'll try to give you an example. If you were to go into so let's say someone come and pitched you an idea, you know, around a new e-commerce business, and you were kind of at the helm where you had to go in and put in the structures and kind of develop the product and then obviously the marketing and so on. Like what makes a successful e-commerce business? That's a big question.
It's very big.
That is a big question.
It's okay.
You
It's
know,
okay.
like,
We can unravel it. We'll unpack it.
Yeah.
Okay. I would start. Well, there's two approaches to it. Either you have a product already or you don't have a product already. Typically, the journey is at the coal phase is really somebody looking at a market and then saying, "Oh, I can develop a cute product for that." Hi Smile, Australian story as well.
Yeah.
Great example of exactly that. Somebody tapping into building a product for the market. Again, I believe it was cheap China products in the beginning, you know, and then growing from there. And again, as you can hear from my conversation here, I respect that a lot. And when I'm saying it like that, it's not a knock on it in any terms whatsoever. That's the start for most companies. You know, they just leave that out of their journey story because it doesn't sound too sexy often. But the answer really is figure out a product for the market. Or if you already have a product, then figure out who your ideal customers are and then really understand them incredibly well. You need to be obsessive around the customers. And then the challenge that I feel most people have is disconnecting the human needs, which retail really is. I need a service, I need a product, I need something for that. How do I get that? The fundamental needs within that is often being it's been constrained by people's understanding of technology and platforms, where you need to stop thinking about e-commerce as being an online platform or the mobile thing or the desktop thing or the tablet thing, and then really just start thinking about how do I broker that. You know, that when you truly become device or technology agnostic and just think about the human need that you're trying to solve, that's a really, really powerful perspective of looking at things completely agnostic and looking at what do they really need here. Because when you start doing that, you start figuring out where they actually engage with things to get inspired by other people to seek out these kind of products. Let me give you an example to not get too ambiguous here. Where do most people find inspiration to books? Funnily enough, a lot of it is actually podcasts. A lot of it is actually TikTok. A lot of it is in different kind of podcasts and different kind of content. They want word of mouth. They want to hear it from other people. They want to hear from other entrepreneurs what other entrepreneurs read to get successful. So the word of mouth, influencers, partnership, whatever you want to call, whatever new label we want to put this soup on this month, but whatever it is, you need to understand where the audience is exploring the products, the service that you're having, where they're being informed by it, what helps them be getting informed on what the product needs to do and work, what are the functions of it, and then also where are the retailers, who are the people who can service that, and you need to figure out where that is, and then you need to then figure out, well, what's the optimal way of transacting that service or that product? What's the ideal way of doing that? And that's again where you can see the emergence of more and more native platforms going out and integrating or building in different kind of e-commerce capacities. Facebook with their Facebook Facebook marketplaces and, product feeds within it, Twitch and TikTok and Instagram all coming out with some kind of commerce or live commerce functionalities, because they understood that a long time ago, because they cared about the customers enough to understand how they explore content or seek information, or how they get informed on buying things. And they could again see the opportunity in tapping in and owning a bit of the supply chain. So the start has to come from an obsessive love of the customer, or an obsessive love of the product or the problem that you're trying to solve. And I love the way that I think it's Airbnb, one of the founders there, he has a principle of how do I create a 7-star hotel or Airbnb solution. What does that look like? And then from there he worked the way backwards. And that's another example of a founder's hustle, where he has a maddening love for the problem, the maddening love for the customer, the experience that they're having, that they're ingraining themselves in the experience, and together with the customers, figuring out what's important for them and building the solution around that. And sometimes you start from a point where it's ridiculous what you need, what you're thinking about. And that's what what's his name, Brian Chesky, or whatever it is, where he came out with that. I think it was a seven-star overnightting, a 7-star bear, and what does that look like? It was with a butler and a rocket ship and stuff like that, like ridiculous stuff. But you work your way backward from that, and then figure out what does it need to look like, and then you build the solution around that. But most people go out the other way and say, "Oh, I can start up a Shopify store. Well, what can the Shopify store do?" And it's madness. It's madness. If you really need to start with the problem, or you need to start with the customer, and then figure out how do I best cater for them. But for most entrepreneurs, the answer still is Shopify store. It's easy access point, easy penetration, low capital investment to get out there, up and running within the weekend. That's easy, right? So that's the reason why it's not ignorable. But you need to start with the customer, need to start with the problem, and then work your way backwards from there. And then everything makes sense for you. What does our e-commerce experience need to look like? What does the post-purchase experience look like? The pre-purchase experience, what does that need to look like? How is the entire marketing mix modeling need to look like over a life cycle stage, before they're in market and after they're in market, the loyalty piece, the in-market, the bottom funnel, up, all of it makes sense when you cared enough about your customer to look at how they move around and how they explore things. Then all of that makes sense for you. All of a sudden you can see that the roadmap for how you need to execute and what kind of strategies you need to put in place to be able to cater for that audience or that customer, that product the right way. It's
so interesting when you say it like that, because I think you look at what the constants are. So like, let's say Shopify is the base. The constant is every one of your competitors is going to use Shopify. What's the other constant? It might be the product, right? So yeah, you can change the product and so on, but the thing that is always going to be different is the customer you're trying to serve and their psychology and how they interact with different brands and their experiences. And so with that kind of customer-centric approach and really understanding the customer and their psychology, then you can start to answer a lot of those questions. Like, what is the experience, on the website? What is the experience post-purchase? What is the experience, how do we communicate to the customer? What, how do we market, and so on. So I think, that talks, what you just said then is a really great framework for people to start with, as it relates to that.
But may I quickly just say, don't ever underestimate the power of somebody just saying, I have a good idea. I can get a bit of product over from Alibaba, get some inventory, take a few snaps on your mobile phone, start up a Shopify store, get it running. While it might be a slow burn, and then a slow thing, getting started, getting your hands in it, step number one. Get the ball rolling on that one, and we'll claw your way through it, right?
Yeah, give yourself a reason to want to know the customer, right? Yes. Like 100%. And like you said, it's like once you started, and like, those things you just mentioned are the constants. Alibaba, product, Shopify store, and then once you start to understand your customer, you can probably learn how to differentiate it, on that level.
There's many ways of getting product. Like I said, I literally sold my partner's used jewelry. Yeah. There's many ways of getting product to get something started.
Yeah, amazing. So I want to move into marketing now. So what I feel like, and this is relative to business as well, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you see marketing, and then we can evolve that conversation into the current landscape. But, again, from like a first principle standpoint, like what are the, if you were walking into a company, it was blank. What are some of the big questions you're answering, or some of the big questions you're asking of, say, a founder or whatever it is around the product and so on? But how do you think about marketing? What are your first principles?
My first principles is to, Well, I like to say it like this. I have two primary jobs or tasks that I need to get done. I need to get everybody who thinks about content, I need to have them thinking about books. And then secondarily, I need to have them thinking about Booktopia. That's really it in a nutshell. Then comes the tactics and how you do that. How do you create the mental availability? How do you create the physical availability? How do you make sure that people are thinking your brand or your company in all these things, all these terms? And how do you make sure that there's an easy access point into your ecosystem of transaction or value exchange when they're in market for it? So I don't think about marketing. I think about customers, and I think this is the complexity that we're navigating in the marketing world as well. Where 1 week we're called growth officers, the next week we're called revenue officers, and then we're customer officers, and then we're marketing officers. Changing the damn label doesn't change the problem. But it's a result that we're seeing. That we have all these label changes right now on what we're doing, what we're focusing, because it's incredibly broad. Marketing today is, driving demand, and leveraging on that demand. And depending on what kind of company you have and what kind of silos or structures that you have in your organization, the remit of that role can be incredibly different from one e-commerce company to another, or one retailer to another. A lot of it comes back into, well, what is the legacy of the company? Was there mutation within the business where different areas, different departments had different teams and different overlapping? At this particular point in time of this company, this person was best to handling this particular area. And then you see all those mutations where different people are doing different things. So this happened from the smallest scrappy little company to the largest public listed company you can possibly imagine. I see it all over the place. So you see people changing their labels. So at a gist, how I perceive marketing is relevance, customer, again, understanding the customer, understanding the product, and then figuring out how do you bridge that? How do you put these two things together? That's probably the simplest way that I can explain how I perceive it, because it is that fundamentally simple. It really is. Customer, problem, product, let's come together. That's it. And then it's the complexity with everything that could fall in on how do you do that, the 4 Ps and the pricing, the product and the placement and all of it. All of these things are still relevant. And then you got agile methodologies and what have you not, digital roadmap. And again, having cut my teeth on all the different areas, both from and can speak both developer language and actually code myself and to design and all of it. It's a very, very broad remit for many companies. And I think still it comes back to the same fundamental thing. We're trying to bridge the connection between a demand and a need.
I think the advice you gave earlier around just being customer centric answers a lot of those questions. And we had an owner of an agency on a few weeks ago, and he kind of said, "Look, the one constant in all of this is the customer. So as long as you put your focus there and you understand them and you understand the principles of psychology, no matter what comes in, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or whether Facebook ads are, on a downward decline," he goes, "it doesn't matter, because as long as you understand the customer, you can go into that market and you can be successful." And that's how if you're a founder or, you're in a role where your job is to, create success over a long period of time, then that's your focus at any one point in time. I think that's what rings true. And it's interesting because, you're a CMO, but I can see in you're a customer person, right? You're your job is to understand the customer and then bridge a lot of those gaps that you were talking about. So it's really interesting that the people that are in marketing roles that are doing it really successfully have that very similar opinion, which I think is a massive learning for people.
I think it is, but yeah, there's a lot of talk about what marketing is and what it's not anymore, and I think for most companies today, most marketing teams have evolved from being the coloring in department very much. For many companies where the marketing team wasn't synonymous with the revenue driving activity, for sales companies right now where they might have boots on the ground or sales teams out there where marketing wasn't actually creating a transaction. It isn't e-commerce. That's the big difference, right? But for many other companies, marketing is the brand team, the coloring in department, if you will, and they're responsible for building that and the mental availability and making sure that people think about that brand. Telco companies and banking companies and etc. The transaction piece doesn't sit with the marketing team, but it does in retail and in e-commerce to an incredible extent. So that's again where in e-commerce and retail, the marketing team is the sales team. They drive the top funnel, the mid funnel, the bottom funnel activity that converts. And depending on where UX or product ownership sits, that digital component as well, that's the transaction layer where it's actually happening. That's the sales assistant that takes the money and needs to work well, you know. But that is very much where marketing has ended up with today. So the capabilities in understanding customers, understanding data, understanding how to interpret data, get the right insights out of it, tools, technologies, they're incredibly important. So it really did transcend from just being customer centricity and just understanding, you know, design principle and pricing principles and merchandising principles and what have you not, but also traveling into the whole data science element where you need to be able to understand why people are doing what they're doing. So it's a complicated world, and it's not a, you know, it's not strange that there's this permutation of what the roles are doing and what they're tapping into, and then from one day to the next you have people who only did marketing in the past in the e-commerce sphere that's now doing digital as well, and vice versa, or splitting it up even more. So there's a lot of changes as the world evolves, and I don't think there's a right or wrong. There's no one size fits them all. There is, where's your company at today? What's the roadmap? What do we need to accomplish? Who do we need to hire? Who do we need to get on board to get to that point? Who are the right skills and the right tools, like I said before, that we need to get on board, and that should govern how you structure and what kind of roles that you have in there. I couldn't care less what my title was, as an example. Couldn't care less. Like I said, I don't perceive myself as a marketer. So, yeah, does that make sense?
100%. You know, mate, I could sit here all day and talk to you like I really could about this stuff, and there's so much more depth that I think we could go to around the nuances and the tactics. But I think fundamentally what you've given people is a framework in how to look at marketing, and it's actually more around the customer and less about the different tactics that you have, because, you know, I almost think of it from talking to you is kind of like this is your North Star, you know, and if you constantly use this as your North Star, you'll be okay. You'll figure it out. But if you kind of steer away from that and you get caught in the shiny object or the tactic or something like that, that's when you can sometimes, you know, maybe make a mistake or go down the wrong path.
Absolutely.
As I said, I could sit here and talk to you all day, but I know we're on the clock. So we're going to dive into the last section of the podcast, which is quickfire. And I have to preface this, I have to do it every week, but because there's no cap on your answer. You don't have to say it quickly or anything like that. But, you know.
It's a slow fire.
Yeah, we'll call it, we should do slow fire. What's one piece of advice for your younger self?
It's going to be okay. Don't take it too hard. That's probably the big one. You were right. Keep doing what you're doing. It will work out, but don't beat yourself up so much. That's probably the biggest advice, and I think it's where we have too much stigma in general, in the corporate world, in general, in the founders world. Being a founder of a successful company or starting an emerging company or just getting, it is an incredibly lonely job. It's an incredibly hard journey. The sacrifices that need to be made, not seeing family, friends, no holidays, no vacations. You don't work, you don't eat. It's a tough and hard world. Not in comparison to so many other people, you know, living in insignificant hardships, but it is difficult. And that road is paved with challenges and decisions that you need to make. Stop doubting yourself is probably one of the other ones, you know. Make the choices that you make and let go. Stop thinking about whether or not you made the right decision or not. It doesn't matter. It's done. Move forward. So I think me personally, because I didn't have that much experience in much of the things that I just threw myself head at, there was a lot of doubt. Are you doing the right things? I didn't have any agency background. I didn't know how to manage an agency client, and you're sitting up with $100,000 projects and stuff. You know, had no experience, no business doing that. Like, people were laughing you out of the room, you know, in the industry. And I think that's probably one of the big ones is for people to really let go of it. Be okay with the decisions that they're making. Stop second guessing. Stop playing out how else it could have been playing out. Trust your decisions and trust that it didn't really matter anyway. You know, the future you will look very different than today you. So yeah, stop beating yourself up. It's going to be okay.
That's extremely powerful, and there's a lot of truth to that, because the business world can force you into a mindset where you can beat yourself up a lot. You know, talking from experience. So Very valuable. So what's one piece of advice you would give to someone who's just started a business or thinking of doing so?
Figure out why you're doing it. That's probably the biggest one. Figure out your motivation of why you want to do what you're doing right now. What was it that led you down that route? I see too many people go down that route and then also not finding a way out. And again, the whole thing, when do I turn off? You know, it's such a big defeat for many people that needs to turn off at some point. You know, you're staring down the barrel of either administration or bankruptcy or something else. For some people, most people, don't forget that. Most people in there. Most companies don't succeed. What is it, 5% that still exists after 15 years or 10 years or whatever it is? Most of us right now will fail. And it's okay. And I think if you really figure out why you're doing it, then it's easy for you to answer the question of, is it worth that? Is this a hill you will die on? Or not? And if you can hand on heart say, yeah, it's worth it. It is. I will. Because my heart and my love and my passion for this problem or this whatever it might be, it is. I'm getting all tinkly. Sorry. You know, the passion for that thing is everything for you. You have to do it. You cannot not do it. If you're at that point, then you gotta go all in. You know, and if you don't, if it really just was money or something else like that, I'm not saying you're not going to succeed, but if that's the only motivation, on those 24, if not 72 hour straight work days that you will have at one point, for some reason or another, you're not going to survive it. You're not going to do it. You're not going to
be successful.
Yeah, or you're probably not going to be able to do it. You might crack, you know, with crack I mean either mentally or, you know, whatever it might be. The people who understand their why will be the people who get out life best, you know, and I think it also comes to best terms with whatever life might throw them, whether or not that becomes success or whether or not that becomes this didn't work, gotta try something else or a different path. Accepting that, and I think a lot of people can't. You see a lot of founders that started up or co-founded incredibly successful businesses. If you seek out the less treaded paths of stories about very successful founders that's built very successful people, it's paved with depression. It's paved with people who didn't mentally survive that journey. It's not being talked about enough. And I think the solution to that is recognizing that this is a real thing and the stigma needs to stop. But also in the early days, figuring out the why. Why are you doing this? And then it's easy to come to, you know, acceptance of whatever life throws at you, I think. Also whatever challenges there might have in the future.
Again, so powerful. And I think it's also one of the hardest things to do, right? Like it's, you know, to truly ask yourself why and not get caught up in the I need to do this because the eyes are on me and so on. And I think it comes back to our conversation at the start of the podcast as well, which is great.
But you're spot on right there, right? All the world's eyes is on me. It's expected of me. My investors expect this of me. The world expects my partner, my friends, and all that. Am I a
failure if this doesn't come?
But that's your ego.
Can I let go?
But that's your ego. Like we talked about earlier on, you need to be able to let go of your ego. If you want to operate a really successful company, you got to let go of the ego.
Amazing. Last one. What's the most important trait that a founder must have for success and why?
There's a few. One of the most important ones is tenacity, resilience, passion, foresight and vision. You need to be able to carve a path that's non-existent. You need to have vision to build something that doesn't exist, and you need to be able to get people on board with that. And the passion and articulating that foresight and articulate that vision is what's going to be contagious and attractive for other people around you. So within that, you have the capacity to attract people originally to your idea and your thought and your company. And within that, then the capabilities to spot, nurture and grow the talent that you do attract originally, so the entire employee value proposition. So for any founder, that becomes incredibly important. Work resilience, like I said, but also the capability to set future vision, road ahead, inspire and build passion around what you're doing in the team. And then that maintaining that is critical for any company, no matter how it is. And that's also very, very difficult. You know, there's spending many years on the same thing can, for some people, quench that thirst, quench that passion. But that's one of the most important things, because it's contagious. And hungry people, you can see it. You can spot a team that's hungry. Sports or whatever it might be. You can see when somebody's doing the mental haka or whatever it might be. You can see, Jesus, they're ready. They're ready to go, right? So that's a powerful thing. It really is. And I think having that, or building the skill set around that, can lead to attracting the right talent, the right people, and investors. It's contagious.
There are three very good answers to those questions. We're going to wrap it up. I want to say a massive thank you to you, Steffen. As I said, I could have sat here for another 3 hours, I reckon, and just picked your brain and learnt from you. I appreciate your time. I know you're obviously very busy, and very grateful for you giving your time to not only myself but also the listeners as well. So a massive thank you. Where can people find you? So is that something?
Yeah, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
It's always
No, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. People can hook me up. I'm sure there's going to be something in the show notes around that.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, just hook me up on LinkedIn. I love talking to entrepreneurs, people in business. I love talking about ideas, and I also love supporting other people and departing and sharing some of the experiences that I have. And whether or not people can use them or not, up to them. But love talking to other entrepreneurs.
Amazing. Once again, thank you so much. Donnie, thanks for putting this together, my man. And to our listeners, again, the last 3 months especially, the support has been literally amazing. And it's because of you we get to talk to people like Steffen, and I, me personally, I get to have this experience as well, which I'm extremely grateful for. So a big thank you to you guys, and we really hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next week.